Welcome back to our last video of the school year. So in this video, we're going to go through the study guide and look at all the questions that we had on there so that you guys can know what the right answers are when you're studying for the test. Okay, so we're going to go fast, so you can pause and go back if you need to, but I'm going to be speed going here. First question is, what is matter made of? What are its tiniest parts? The tiniest parts of matter are atoms. Number 2, what is the name for a substance that has two or more atoms stuck together? That's a compound. Boom. Number 3, what are the 3 big groups of elements on the periodic table? So 3 big groups on the periodic table of elements are metals, nonmetals, and semimetals in the middle. That's what any element will be categorized as. In the second lesson, we learned how scientists describe matter. What are the 5 ways? They are color, mass, volume, temperature, and texture. What does the word mass mean? Mass is just the amount of matter stuck in an object. So some objects have more matter, some objects have less. And that's what causes them to weigh more or less, which is how we can measure the mass. What does temperature actually mean? So we've always said like, oh, it's colder or hotter, but what does that actually mean? In science, it is how quickly the tiny particles in the matter are vibrating back and forth. If they're vibrating really fast, we say that it's hot. If they're not vibrating much at all, we say that it's cold. So hot things vibrate faster than cold things. What does the word volume actually mean? The amount of space something takes up. Big things take up more space, small things don't. How could you describe the texture of something? Texture is how we say things like, oh, it feels smooth, or feels rough, or feels grainy. Any of those words you can think of to describe how something feels. That's the texture. Okay. Matter always exists in one of 3 different states. States of matter are solids, liquids, gases. Which state of matter has a definite shape and a definite volume? That is solids. They always have the same shape and the same volume. Which state has no shape but has a definite volume? It can get bigger or smaller. That's a liquid. A liquid is not going to suddenly change size. Like if you have a glass of milk, it's not going to suddenly be empty or suddenly be full. It has a specific volume but no shape. But gases, on the other hand, have no volume or shape because they can fill up an entire room after a little while or be compressed into a tiny, tiny little space. Okay. What is a mixture? Thinking scientifically. A mixture is when 2 substances are combined, brought together, but they don't chemically bond with each other. So when you mix together sugar, lemon juice, water, those things come together to form lemonade, but if you evaporate the water, you'll be left with the sugar behind. And if you could somehow, I don't know how this would work, but you could extract the lemon juice out of the water. All 3 pieces are not changed when they're mixed together. They're just brought into the same area and mixed very finely. So a mixture is not a compound. It is something entirely different. So think about this. If you have a mixture of nails and sand, how could you separate those 2? So there's tons of ways. You could use a strainer to strain the sand out and leave the nails. You could literally pick the nails out by hand because they're big. You could use a magnet to pull the nails out of the sand. You could wash the sand away with water, since it probably won't wash the nails away. There's a ton of different ways you could do this, but they're able to be separated because it's a mixture. If you chemically combine the sand with the nails, you wouldn't be able to separate them. Okay, what is the term for how easily something dissolves in another substance? So is it easy for salt to dissolve in water? Yes, because salt has a high solubility. Solubility is that measure of how easy it is to dissolve something. Let me tell you, oil has a very, very low solubility, pretty much 0, because it does not dissolve in water at all. It's extremely hard to do that. Cornstarch also has a low solubility. It's difficult to dissolve cornstarch in water. After you learn how to describe matter, you can start to study how it can change. What is the difference between a physical change and a chemical change? Physical changes are when you adjust something about the matter, change something about the matter, without changing what it is. So take a piece of paper, rip it in half. Both pieces are still paper. Take that paper, shove it in a shredder, the tiny little pieces that are left, all still paper. You can even dunk the paper in water, crumple it up into a ball, squeeze it out. It's still paper. That's a physical change. It's very different than it was before, but it hasn't changed its identity. Now, if you would take that paper, light it on fire, suddenly it's not paper anymore. It's changed to ash and carbon dioxide gas and residue. And so that's all different than what the paper was originally. Chemical changes alter what type of a substance you have. And it can happen very fast in the case of like an explosion, or very slowly in the case of yeast in bread or something like that, where it takes minutes to hours to actually work. So example of a physical change, like I said, is ripping, tearing, shredding a piece of paper. An example of a chemical change would be something like rust, something like baking soda and vinegar, where you produce something new out of combining two things together. I also posted 2 pictures on here. The first picture was a piece of metal that's very, very rusty. That's an example of a chemical change because rust is a chemical change. Second picture is a picture of a kid folding a piece of paper. That would be an example of a physical change because it's still paper, it's just folded. And that is it. That's all the questions that were in our study guide. So that's the end of the video. Now, before we go, I wanted to say I have really enjoyed having you guys in my class this year. We've been able to learn a lot of really fun stuff, and I am looking forward to what we can learn next year. I'm praying that you guys will have a really good summer and we'll have a lot of fun. And I pray that we'll have a very smooth start to the school year next year, and it won't be super stressful. Fingers crossed, please. So yeah, have a great summer, and I will see you next year.